Mike Tramp. It is your rock and roll biography on the Big Fat American Radio Network. Go ahead, Mike. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then talk about your new project.
And what a biography it is. How the hell do you put 42 years down on just like a couple of minutes? But anyway, born and raised in Copenhagen, Denmark. That's a little country in the Scandinavian place, the north of Europe. Had never planned to enter the music world. My mom had given me and my two brothers an acoustic guitar that stood in the corner of the little apartment we lived in. But, it was never anything more than just something that we sat and strummed some Elvis and Dylan songs on. But by the time I was 15 and a half years old, somebody else had looked at me and, I don't know what they saw in me, but they asked if I was willing to, to do like an audition for a band, which happened to be 10 years older than me. And before I knew it, I was calling my mother from the band's house saying, Mom, do you think it would be okay to drop out of school at 15 and a half and join a rock band? And, she said yes. And I think that my mom really just thought, it'd be one less plate on the table. She had to put food on. And I was lucky in that way that it turned out to be a good journey. There was a lot of hills and a lot of mountains to climb and a lot of ins and outs and a lot of lessons learned. But now, 27 albums later, I think, this has been an incredible journey. In 82, I came to America with my band from Denmark, and we were playing the clubs in New York. And this was just, of course, everybody knew this was just at the time when MTV had started. Rock and roll was flourishing. People were smiling. The clubs were packed with people with big hair and everything like that. And that was just a great feeling. And we fell right into that place. And at the end of 82, we're playing in a club in Brooklyn called Lemoore, rock capital of Brooklyn. And we're sitting in the dressing room, and in through the door walks what I could see was a guitar player because his guitar was hanging half out his broken case. And I just thought to myself, man, what a loser. Huh. That guy was Vito Bratta, which only a couple months later, I formed White Lion with, we had gone back to Denmark and ended as a band. And I had tasted what America was about. And I went back and I called Vito up the first night I came in and says, remember me? I was the guy in the other band. He says, yeah, I've been thinking about you. And we met the next day and we started White Lion.
Oh, that is a cool story. Before we talk a little bit more about White Lion, I want to bring you back to Denmark. I'm a big fan of Father Ted. I don't know if you've ever watched that comedy out of England.
Which one?
Father Ted.
Okay, yeah. No, I don't know that one, but I know English comedy.
Okay, well, Father Ted, Father Jack, and Dougal are three priests that live on Craggy Island. And they decide they're going to compete against another group of priests, and they're going to enter the Eurovision contest. So they end up winning, and My Lovely Horse is what they come up with. And they don't win. Ireland gets 0 votes for the Eurovision contest. And it seems to me the Eurovision is a really big thing to the point where they make comedies about it and entering it. And then I ended up watching it myself. And I thought,
you're not supposed to go there.
What, you mean Eurovision? Not supposed to talk about that? This is great. This is great. I love this kind of stuff. Not too many Americans are even aware of Eurovision, but once you watch it, you start to think to yourself, oh my gosh, maybe I could write a horrible song and do well. And it goes by country. Now, you were with Denmark, and your song was Boom Boom. So how did you do in the Eurovision Song Contest of 1978? And do you think that Boom Boom would have beaten out My Lovely Horse by Father Ted?
Probably not. Let me give your listeners a little bit of a different side of what the Eurovision Song Contest was.
Okay,
and
fair
what
enough.
It has become, and
All
what
right.
it's become.
Okay.
For example, I think it has been going on since the 50s. But Denmark had been out of it for a long time. But in 78, they decide that it's time to go back in. in '74, ABBA, one of the biggest songwriting bands in history, won with Waterloo and obviously opened the door to a lot of people. Not something that necessarily I remember happened, but I remember the song, obviously, and the career ABBA had worldwide.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're in the studio doing our second album, and our record company A&R guy comes into the studio. This is a rock record, and it's basically finished. And he says, Denmark, has decided to go back into the Eurovision Song Contest, and I think we should try to be part of that. I mean, first of all, you have to do the local one. First, you have to win in Denmark before you become the representative of Denmark.
That's right.
So he starts listening to the album, and there's nothing on that album that has anything to do with Eurovision Song Contest. But there is maybe one little song, which is sort of like a folk song, a song from a night at the opera called 39 by Queen had inspired us to write. And so he sees the potential in that. And we put some Danish lyrics together and stuff like that. But at that time, I'm still just a kid. And he says, it should be the guitar player that sings the song. We had 3 singers in the band, the guitar player, myself, who also played guitar, and the bass player. And this is one of those lessons you learn in life. Sometimes you just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
But instead I say, what about me? So then he says, you know what? We'll make it into a duo. And then, of course, it represents the band. We then get selected because a lot of Danish songwriters put these songs together and put into a committee, and 6 artists get selected to battle this out and on national TV. Now, again, for the listeners in the great country of America, we had 1 channel television, which meant the day we went on TV to battle this out with the other 5 contestants, the entire country is watching this.
Yeah, see, that's great. It's your Super Bowl in Denmark.
This is a Super Bowl without the break, without the popcorn, without all that stuff, without the commercials. It's non-commercial TV. It's a socialistic country, but without, the other side.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So
for some reason, we also happen to be the biggest teen band in Denmark. I mean, when I say teen, I mean basically that our fans are teen. So out of the 1,800 spectators in the concert theater that we are doing this TV show from, 1,799 are our screaming girl fans.
Yay!
Every time we do. So they're going around and they go to all the different local cities in Denmark, and the local radio station, have gathered a little bit of committee, and they all go like this: we don't want to disappoint the little girls. We vote for Mabel, which was the name of the band. And we took this thing by storm, man. And that day, I wrote history in that way, that my returning, every time I return to my home country, I carry that backpack from that time. Now, in 1978, when then you met up, in this case, we were meeting in Paris because the year before, the French had won the Eurovision Song Contest.
Right.
You have to sing in your own language. And Danish is not necessarily the most flowing language. I'm not blaming it just on that, but we were not cut out with this song to represent and battle out against some of the other ones. Actually, Israel won in 1978.
Wow.
Now,
cool.
Eurovision contest got bigger and bigger and bigger, and a lot of the Baltic countries, especially after the Soviet Union went down and everything, and it has now turned into one of the biggest politically and money games of anything, where now you have songwriters from other countries writing songs for countries they're not even a citizen of. So I mean, Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath wrote a song for Croatia. So what I'm hinting at is it has just turned out to be something that all good things end up being, a mess of something that doesn't have anything to do with presenting a songwriter contest.
Oh yeah,
I'm talking about a songwriter. This would be the equivalent. This would be the equivalent of, and I'm not favoring any team here of being, the Raiders are in the Super Bowl against, the Browns or the Jaguars, and you're down to the final 3 seconds, and they call in Tom Brady.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Well, I mean, so to give an American an idea of Eurovision, it's like the Olympics of music, and you have people that wrap themselves around their country's flag, and they have parties. They go nuts. They'll set up cameras to the different capitals of Europe, and people will get their reaction by how the voting goes. It's actually a lot of fun. And even though, like, some of the songs, in my opinion, kind of suck, they're kind of funny at the same time. But then every once in a while, you get a diamond in the rough. And then when you finally get the winner, Mike, you can't figure out how they won, right? Just like you said, the Browns, what do you mean? The Browns? Out of everybody, the Browns? Right?
Even voting on music is controversial.
Yes. Now,
and for a whole year, this debate goes on. And listen, it's also gone on in the sport of who gets a World Cup and corruption and stuff like that.
Soccer or
it
football.
It has always ended up there, but exactly. I tell you what, they've even included Australia because Australians love the Eurovision Song Contest. But they said that if Australia win, Australia will not hold, the Eurovision Song Contest.
Well, I could see that. I think there were some surprises in that whole thing. But obviously, it's something that you're passionate about, and I'm glad I brought it up. And, this is what makes these kind of interviews so much fun, when you find a storyline that most people won't even think of asking. Now, let's move over to White Lion before we get into your brand new single. And here's what I was wondering. I could have sworn when I was a disc jockey in Indiana, and I was working the nights, and it was the hair bands are all over the place. I remember playing White Lion's "Wait" and "When the Children Cry," but I really liked, and now it makes sense. You did a cover of Golden Earrings, "Radar Love," did you not?
Yes, we did. On the third album, on Big Game. It's the short little story there was, this is, again, one of these, like, strange scenarios. Japan was trying to prevent Japanese fans from buying American import. So they were asking the record company to give them bonus tracks. Vito Bratta and myself, my songwriting partner, great guitar player from White Lion, we always wrote each White Lion album as a book, chapter by chapter. We did not have any throwaways. We stopped when we felt we had the 10 songs from the album. So when our record company, our managed company says we need bonus track for Japan, we couldn't pull one out. I'm not saying that we couldn't have written one, but we were a little stubborn. And we're there, at rehearsals, prior to going to the studio to record the Big Game album. And I just go, let's do Radar Love. And I'd grown up with this song. I don't know why I said that. We did the song. We actually, in many ways, there's another story behind the album, but we really felt that song turned out so great because the song is one of the greatest rock songs ever written.
Oh, fantastic.
We did justice to the song. And the fans love this song. And we finally ended up saying, we're not giving it as a bonus track. We're leaving on the album worldwide.
That's awesome. And you did a great job covering it. If you're going to cover something, do it very well.
And actually Golden Eric gave us praise for it. They really loved that, we have been very true to the song. Usually when you do a cover of a song and you want to do a new version of it, I think we just updated it a little, but kept the magic of this great rock and roll song.
Yeah, you kept the spirit of it, which is great. And Golden Earring, by the way, they're one of those groups that goes underneath the radar and underappreciated. I would say that That's frustrating for me when groups like White Line or Golden Earring, I don't think they get the love that they should be getting because both bands are really better than people, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I've grown up as being a European. Golden Earring was from Holland. I already discovered the band in the early 70s and things like that. The band had already existed in the late 60s,
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was nice for me to see that the band, besides Radar Love, also, having a few MTV hits with, Bullet Hits the Bone and stuff like that. And they were always a very unique band. There's no band like Golden Earring, and, Barry Hay, the singer, very unique voice, always stood by themselves. So, I mean, it is what it is.
What about Led Zeppelin? Are you a fan of Led Zeppelin? Because I got a follow-up question if you are.
Yeah, I mean, and I almost think I know the question, but yeah, I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. Now, I discovered Zeppelin a little bit later because I was too young to understand Zeppelin when they came out. That was my brother's vinyl collection that we were not allowed to touch, me and my younger brother. And I actually worked my way back from Zeppelin Presence, where Achilles' Last Stand, that almost 10-minute long, epic, really caught my attention later on, because I've been a big Queen fan, big Thin Lizzy, Sweet and Sweet, all that stuff that came out in Zeppelin. So Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Zeppelin were like the grown-up rock and roll. Once I was a musician, or once I was a songwriter, and I really went deep into Zeppelin, obviously, I became a massive and am a massive Zeppelin fan. And I hear Zeppelin in every single band existing after Zeppelin.
When did you realize that Zeppelin was a very good cover band?
I never discovered that. I call them the ultimate trio in something that almost no band had been able to reproduce until sort of Van Halen came around with the first couple albums, and one guitar, bass, and drums were able to fill that sound spectrum in their own way. Of course, there's nothing Zeppelin in Van Halen except for just the way the three instrument works together. I not necessarily sure if I get your point in Zeppelin be a cover band.
Well, because if you look at the first couple of albums specifically, and then a few other tracks that were released or that you heard on FM radio here in the United States, they're versions of Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, Robert Johnson, stuff like Traveling Riverside Blues was originally written by...
But, in that way, so did Elvis. So did everybody else. I think it just seems to be like, the second Dylan had done a song, three bands went out and did the same version, stuff like that. So the Zeppelin songs that I call the Zeppelin songs are not the songs you're talking about and things like that. You know,
right.
I think that the natural blues inspiration, same thing the Stones had, et cetera, was a natural, which I call myself, like the torchbearer. You get handed that and you're carrying it on in your way, as long as you remember to put the songwriters as credit.
Well, that was sort of an issue up until maybe, I'm going to say the 80s or 90s. I forget which year. But, yeah, Willie Dixon finally got his due with a whole lot of love. It's only fair. If you want to say that you're going to take an original blues song from the 20s, like from Memphis Minnie, and make it into When the Levee Breaks and have your own spin to it, that's great. But you really should credit the inspiration of that song or give partial credit for the writing of that song, because you're taking that from another artist, and I always felt that you owe the other person that kind of respect. It's a human thing. That's all.
No, of course it is. I wonder if that only sort of existed in music, or people never really gone into literature or movies or something like that. Because obviously, I heard somebody on the radio the other day. We talking about politics, like like democracy was stolen from Greece, and republic was stolen from Rome. And then I go, I know, I can't really follow history in the world anymore. I mean, everybody's just can you just let it be for what it is? And it happened. And Second World War happened, and this happened, stuff like that. All we got to make sure of it is that it doesn't happen again, but stop referring to it constantly.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's always something that I find curious because we all grew up listening to the same songs, and then when I discovered what they were based on, it blew my mind. And you know what that caused me to do, Mike? I went deeper into the music. I researched the various composers. I learned about their music, and I started to appreciate their technique. And then finally, it was almost as if these great blues legends came to the surface. And that's really cool. And any time as an artist you can do things like that, awesome. For instance, if you ask me,
I agree.
If you ask me what kind of disc jockey I am, I would say, well, I'll tell you, there were some master DJs that I borrowed from. I borrowed from the famous Scott Muni. You probably remember that name. And
I know Scott.
Yeah, Dan Ingram from CBS FM, Don Imus from NBC, and a few others. Yeah. And then what I did is I developed my own masterpiece with those things. It's sort of like an artist. You have maybe you like Peter Max, and then you like maybe Andy Warhol, and you also like a classic by Da Vinci, and then you take all of those, the best of each one, and you make your own masterpiece with it. So.
But what about if you just went that this is just the way we are as human beings, and it's just part of us that just like how we have grown as sapiens and on and on and on, that it's just natural in us that we see and we do, and monkey see, monkey do, and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, there's see, monkey do. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah,
there's almost no more chord progressions to write a new song.
No.
That hasn't always been done. I would not be surprised if one of my choruses or one of my melody lines exists out there in another song, if that was the thing. And the person came up and says, listen, I have this recorded in 1982. Here's the track of it. And I say, yeah, I can hear that. I wouldn't fight that.
No, I wouldn't either.
But
I'd be like, I think that'd be cool.
I don't know if it exists.
Well, there's always what I like is the new generation of musicians, performers, artists that are coming up, and whenever they sample something really well from an established artist, let's say they took "When the Children Cry" and they were able to make it into a cool rap song. If that was me in your shoes, I'd be like, I'd be thrilled that somebody did that. The point that I'm making has nothing to do with money. It's more of being able to recognize what's going on in the world around us and looking for the deeper meaning. That's what art's supposed to evoke in each and every one of us. And you take your lifetime experiences and you put it into your everyday being. So let's talk about what you're doing now. You have a new album that's coming out, new single that we have here. It's called Dead End Ride. Can you tell us about the musicians and maybe a little bit of a background information?
Well, I can give you why I still got just a few minutes left for you. I can give you that in '96, Tramp stepped out on his own, and there I recorded my first solo album, Capricorn. And now in 2019, I'm releasing my 11th solo album. Along those 11 albums, there has been a consistent path of style. I decided very clear that I would represent who I am as a person in my lyrics. I represent Mike Tramp in my songs. My style of music comes from the first time I sat with a guitar and played Knocking on Heaven's Door back in Denmark. My style is what I am, and it's not going to change, and it's been a continuing journey. Each album has represented maybe a year and a half or 2 years in that period, or maybe some memories from the past. And this is a journey that those who started with me on that journey or have joined on is following along that path, and that path is not going to change. Probably the question is just, where is the journey ending? I don't know, but the new album is the 11th album. It's the 11th chapter of the saga that I started in 96. And maybe if I told you that the first album should have been called Stray from the Flock and not the 11th one, basically meaning that I took a right turn and I sort of went away from what I've been part of, probably more the image and the sound of the 80s rock and roll with White Line, stuff like that. And on every single Mike Tramp album, I am 100% representing myself. With the new album, it's not just another album, but it is that moment in time that is caught there, 2017, 2018, a lot of personal issues, my father passing away, my brother passing away last year, my own view of life, my struggle with understanding governments and wars and things like that. And all that stuff is something that I get praised for every night by the fans that come to the shows, that they see themselves in those songs. And that is, to me, the greatest reward, And I surround myself with a lot of musicians that have been part of my life, and I like them to be part of my music because I feel that the friendship brings something else out in the music than a check, that I just hired someone. So having my brothers, which I call my band, Band of Brothers, because it's a revolving door. A lot of people come and go, but they're all my friends and they're all my brothers. And now with releasing Dead End Right, it is the perfect DNA of what Mike Tramp is and what his 11th solo album sounds like.